Hi, I am Soumya Pawar and you are listening to Always On, the price we pay to be first. Imagine it's 2 a.m., your phone lights up, a notification, a breaking alert, another update. You tell yourself you'll just check it for a second, but a second turns out into scrolling, tracking, verifying, and reacting. Now imagine that's not a habit, but your responsibility. And that's what we are going to talk about today. In today's digital newsroom, the line between on duty and off duty has almost disappeared. News doesn't wait for the morning editions anymore. It breaks in real time on websites, on Instagram, on X, across platforms where speed often, defines the relevance today. And journalists, they're expected to keep up with all of it, to report faster, to verify quicker, to publish first, and correct later if needed. Because in this system, attention is the currency, and being first often matters more than being finished. People need to understand that behind every headline is a journalist working in that constant stream, refreshing feeds, cross checking data, responding instantly, and sometimes making decisions under pressure, often without a pause. So, this episode looks at that kind of work and what it does to the people behind the news. What happens when your job is not just to follow a story but to stay with it every minute it involves? When the story you are covering follows you to your home, to your dinner table, and stays with you long after your shift ends. We'll be talking about the burnout not just as a buzzword but as a professional reality in journalism. The mental strain of constant deadlines, the pressure to stay visible, accurate, and relevant at the same time. And I think it's very normalized these days. People, without even realizing this thing, are constantly under pressure to be first, because in digital journalism it's no longer enough to be present, you have to be immediate. And somewhere along the way, I think the cost of being first has started to overweigh the cost of being well. So through conversations today, we are going to reflect on lived experiences. We'll explore how this relentless pace is reshaping not just the journalism as a field, but lives of journalists within it. Because the world might sleep, but in this race to break the news, many journalists don't. As someone who has recently started working as a journalist, I have experienced for how long the story stays with you even after the shift ends. Keeping up with the fast paced newsroom, you do not realize how soon it starts taking a mental toll on your psychology. So, this leads to us our very first segment, that is Breaking Point. We have Subuddhi Keshwani with us. She is a psychologist who studies stress and trauma in high pressure working environment. Clicks, share, retweets, live, on air. It's not a surprise for us to know that metrics have taken over us. But let's understand, does this constant pressure cross a line? As a therapist, Subudhi, I want to ask you, at what point does overwork become psychological harm?
I think overwork becomes psychological harm when recovery is no longer possible. It's not. It's not just about the long hours. It's when the body and mind don't get enough time to reset. When exhaustion becomes chronic and your sleep gets disturbed, your irritability increases, so naturally your motivation drops and you start feeling emotionally numb or detached from your work. That's the shift. It's no longer I am tired. It's about I can't just I can't just switch it off.
How can one distinguish between burnout and everyday stress?
What clinically distinguishes burnout from everyday stress? Everyday stress is usually short term and situation based, whereas burnout is chronic. Stress says I have too much to do, whereas burnout says nothing I do matters anymore. It's deeper and more identity level.
So, do you think that being online throughout the day affects a cognitive function?
Cognitively, it can impair working memory and decision making. You are reacting instead of thinking. And journalism, especially digital journalism, runs on that constant reactivity.
So, Buddhi, could you explain to our audience who are not journalists what digital fatigue could mean?
I'd say imagine never fully logging off. Even when you are physically away from work, your brain is still scanning headlines, anticipating breaking news, checking metrics.
Absolutely, that's so true. How worse do you think these tight deadlines are for our mental health?
Yes, absolutely. Chronic deadline pressure keeps the nervous system in a prolonged stress response. When cortisol stays elevated for long periods, it can increase vulnerability to anxiety disorders, depression, and even sleep disorders like insomnia. Over time, the brain adapts to urgency as normal, which makes relaxing difficult. The body starts to believe that calm is unsafe.
Can even secondhand trauma of the stories we cover affect our brains?
Even secondhand trauma, like repeatedly editing violent footage or reporting on tragedy, can activate similar neural pathways as direct trauma. The brain doesn't always distinguish between lived and vividly processed experience. Over time, this can lead to hypervigilance, emotional numbing, intrusive thoughts, what we call secondary traumatic stress. It's real and it's neurological.
I believe the burnout might look different for every individual, right? So, is it a resilience issue or an environmental issue?
I genuinely believe burnout is a primarily environmental issue. Framing it as a resilience issue individualizes a systematic problem. If an entire newsroom is exhausted, it's not that everyone suddenly lacks coping skills, it's the structure.
As journalists, we have to keep some caps for the deadline and the work. So, does it also affect the psychology of our brains?
Are workload caps psychologically effective? Yes, but only if they are genuinely enforced. But if workload caps exist only on paper while productivity culture remains intense, the stress just shifts internally. So, structural enforcement matters more than the policy statements.
Very well put, Subudhi. I completely agree with you. While the expert's knowledge always helps better in understanding the science behind the burnouts that we face, but reality comes out to its true essence after having a one on one conversation with a person who has lived it. To hear what it feels like to be on toes throughout, I spoke with working journalist who remains anonymous here. With that, moving forward to our next segment, the caps on deadline, I would like to ask, how has the change from traditional media to fast paced digital era has changed the things for you?
To this, I'd like to respond that uh, in digital journalism, what is actually required of us is alertness in terms of getting the story first before any other competitive platforms. So, and post that, we also monitor social media as to the responses that we get in there, and then the analytics of the chart beat as to how the story is performing, etc. And then whether the news alert has gone, whether we have like put our story or pulled up our story on top or not. So like this pressure is actually palpable to publish the stories quickly before any other handle, and still verifying the facts and whatever statements that you are making therein, and to add all these multimedia elements, so you have to add all those like infographic stuff into like your script. So like to package it all within the stipulated time is actually the challenge, which is entirely different from print based journalism. And I feel also that this is quite challenging for those people who might be technologically not sound to an extent that they actually inculcate all those elements into one and give it in a timely format. So that was about it.
Can you describe how a typical busy day looks like for you?
If I were to tell with respect um to an interview, we have to gather all those informations quickly. We have to contact the sources and get in comments, verify, and also like to have their schedules adjusted to ours, and vice versa. and we are expected to know all the continuous updates. I think the pace with which we do things is actually intense, and the decision has to be made quickly as to whether to interview a person concerned or whether to take this story forward or not. So, this editorial discretion and everything in and around, um, I think the timing and everything, like to get everything right in the first place, I think that process is intense. So, like a typical day would like involve something which will be the spotlight for the day, and getting it done, like gathering the information quickly, contacting the sources, verifying the facts.
We have entered an online space even in journalism. So, do you feel the expectations to always be online? And if yes, how does that affect you?
No, I do not feel any obligation or have any such idea that I have to be online all the time, because I'm completely okay not being online, being on social media. And I think it's even better to have a day where you actually do not access any sort of social media and take a complete break from them.
Very well said. I think digital detox is very important, especially for journalists, because we are consuming news every day, every minute, and at some point it starts taking a mental toll on us. With that, do you get that space to discuss mental health in your working environment?
Yes, it is safe to discuss your mental health at your workplace if the work is getting overwhelming, because nowadays it's not that much taboo the way it was in older days. Because if you point out that you are going through some sort of issue, then that might be even helpful for your team members and everyone to understand. um, so yeah, it's better and comfortable to share.
Now that we know that we can talk about our mental health at professional spaces, what changes can make the newsroom even better and have a healthier culture?
I'd say that reasonable workloads according to the experience of the person concerned, and also support from the editors, open communication so far as um, any problem or impediment is concerned. So when you are facing any difficulty, you can approach the editors. So I think pace, collaborative support, and a reasonable workload is actually are some of the traits that I feel will make the newsroom culture a bit more healthier.
That's a very positive approach towards looking at the future of the digital journalism. But we understand that deadlines are not the only things that make us function like that. It's the traffic that requires true vigilance. And today, in this digitally dominated era, everything is heavily influenced by data, clicks, and engagement metrics. So, as we move forward to our last segment, metrics behind the stress, we shift our focus from what audience sees to what actually happened behind the newsroom. And to help us understand better, we are joined by a social media executive who has extensively worked in a fast paced newsroom. For professional reasons, they have chosen to remain anonymous, but their experience offers a rare and honest look into what system looks like and what happens behind the newsroom on daily basis. So, drawing from your experience and also looking it through a broader lens of academics, to what extent do you think the speed driven algorithm creates that pressure within the newsroom, and does it also potentially affect the ethical decision making?
Okay, so that's a really nice question and an important one. I believe essentially when news outlets start prioritizing metrics and clicks, engagements, it creates a culture where sensationalism trumps accuracy. So you are more likely to see headlines designed to grab attention rather than convey the full story.
With that, I would like to ask that how does journalist well-being impact the news and quality of the news that we consume?
uh, it's a vicious cycle, isn't it? Like when journalists are burnt out, the whole system suffers. If they are constantly on the clock, rushing to meet deadlines and dealing with online harassment, their ability to dig deep and tell the stories that matter gets compromised. And it's not just about individual journalists; it's also about the impact on the information we are all consuming. If they are not functioning at their best, we are not getting the full picture.
If the people who are telling us the news are not doing well, then as you mentioned that it could affect the information that they're sharing with us. So who exactly is benefiting from the current speed driven model in newsroom?
So the platform and big media organizations are raking it in while journalists are burning out and audiences are getting clickbait. So it's like system is rigged. Short-term gains for some while long-term losses for others. The thing is, it's not just about individual journalists or news organizations. It's a systematic issue. So the world model is to design and to prioritize speed and engagement over the quality. And we are all just kind of stuck in the cycle, wondering when someone will hit the brakes.
Someone really needs to, hit those brakes, because clearly the system is unsustainable. So what do you think needs to be changed, and who is responsible for making those changes?
Exactly. Burnout isn't a personal flaw, it's a symptom of a system. You can't expect a journalist to hit the brakes when the whole machine is built for speed. Platforms can't keep rewarding the fastest post. If algorithms keep amplifying whatever spikes the most, they are pushing editors to chase the same fire.
Exactly. As you mentioned, it's the system. It's not only the editors who have to slow their pace, it's not the newsrooms that have to set healthier boundaries. Maybe there is no single answer to this question, because this is the system that we have built, and maybe being first shouldn't always matter more than being right. And more importantly, just because behind every update, every breaking alert, every headline we scroll past, we have to realize that there's a person who stayed up to make sure that we saw it. A person who is expected to always be on, and even when they're running on empty brains. So maybe the real shift begins when we start asking different questions, not just how fast can go, but maybe how long can we sustain this. So, and also at what cost. One thing that has been made clear today is it's never the working hours of a professional that leads to the burnout, but it's the emotional weight that constantly engages our brain to crash. It definitely flags a larger question of the mental well being of a future journalist and journalism itself. If people responsible for updating the world are constantly overworked and exhausted, this might eventually start affecting the quality of news that we consume and lower the authenticity of journalism. About time we ourselves bring some small changes by recognizing such mental health patterns that reflect burnout in the newsrooms. This is the very first step towards achieving a healthier news space, because the story must not come out at the cost of exhausting the storyteller, right? Thanks for listening to Always On, the price paid for being first. This is Soumya Pawar, and I appreciate you joining me on this journey of understanding what goes beyond storytelling in journalism.